I'm Shorty Sneed reporting for the Gulfport Gridiron Club and the famous Grid Picks. High school games, Brandon beat Gulfport High 20-13 in 4 overtimes. The game was tied 7-7 at the end of regulation. The teams traded TDs in the first overtime. Both missed the extra point. Neither team scored in the second and third overtime, and Brandon scored on a 5-yard TD run in the 4th overtime. And so Gulfport High goes to 1-3 on the year, having a tough season, but they do play West Harrison this week. West Harrison got beat 34-0 by Harrison Central in the Battle of Cousins, and so maybe the Admirals can get well this week, because it doesn't sound like West Harrison is going to be too formidable. In other games, Poplarville beat St. Stanislaus 27-7. 3 different running backs gained over 100 yards, led by Greg Swan with 122 yards and 3 TDs for Poplarville. Moss Point beat Stone County 56-50 in a great defensive battle. Quarterback Reuben Lee led Moss Point. He was 25 out of 32 with 5 touchdowns and 2 rushing TDs, so he accounted for 7 touchdowns in one game. He had 432 yards passing. Running back Carlos Brown for Stone had 32 carries for 359 yards and 5 TDs himself. So that was a battle of Lee and Brown in the Moss Point and Stone County game. In a battle of cousins that I referred to, Harrison Central beat West Harrison 42-0. Sophomore quarterback Christian Turner was 10 out of 13 with 3 TDs and 182 yards. Wide receiver Isaiah Atkins caught 6 of those for 132 yards and 2 TDs. And again, West Harrison plays at Gulfport this week, so that may help. In another family battle of cousins, and of course, we all know that in Biloxi, everybody's kin, D'Iberville goes to 3-0, beating Biloxi 34-0. I wish I could have been at that game. Justin Wiley for D'Iberville, whose brother Jaden is at Mississippi State, had 91 yards on 7 carries and caught 4 passes for 43 yards, and also played cornerback on defense. And I suspect he has committed to Minnesota, but I suspect that if he you're interrupting, and my wife is interrupting and is on the air in the background. She doesn't. This is not ladies' night at Gridiron Club, Patty. It doesn't happen until the end of the season, so get on out of the way. But I will say that if this kid continues to play that many positions that well, that I expect Mike Leach might find a place for him with his brother at Mississippi State. Who knows? Speaking of Mike Leach, we got to lead off with that game. I was just telling Taylor that I watched the Mississippi State LSU game at Todd Stennis' house. I entered into enemy territory. I got Henry Kissinger to negotiate a truce and allowed me to go. For those of you who don't know, the Stennises and the Sneeds go way back with, it all evolved out of a 1977 Notre Dame Ole Miss game when Notre Dame was #1 in the country, and Ole Miss beat Notre Dame. And on the ride back on the Trailways bus, chartered bus of about 40 people, we decided to get off the road and come into Stennis's yard, not drive on his yard though, come into his yard and raise a rebel flag on top of the flagpoles that sit in front of his house, which we did, but Tom wasn't home, neither was his wife, the 2 kids were home. Pam came out, she was about 12 years old, and Todd was about 5, maybe she was 10, I don't know. And they tried to stop us from raising the flag, but we prevented them from preventing us, and that evolved into an early morning phone call that I got from Jimmy Dukes, who was one of my fraternity brothers, who was an associate at the time at that Bryant Stennis law firm. And Dukes whispered to me on the telephone that he thought that Stennis was getting ready to file the $2 million lawsuit against Trailways and John Doe. That would be me, because I was in charge of the trip. And that he was going to probably, Jimmy Dukes was going to probably get fired. Well, I thought that was a little bit out of hand, so I drove over there to confront Stennis in person, and he made me wait 30 minutes to cool my heels. Finally got in to see him, and he screamed at me, and I screamed at him and told him what, I was apologizing in essence, and told him what good sports was all done in fellowship and friendship, and he said, well, as long as you GD know it wasn't taken that way. So we spent another 30 minutes arguing and cussing, and I walked out of there having written his insurance, and we became friends for life. And we also, Todd and I decided when his dad died that he and I would carry on this trophy. So every year we give whoever loses has to get the plaque engraved. We've got plaque now, it's 2 of them with all the scores of Ole Miss and State on the plaque from each game, and you have to bring it around Christmas time and deliver a present maybe, and deliver the plaque. And so it's always cute to watch me exchange that with his 2 kids, and they're like surrogate. I'm like a surrogate grandfather. That's too long a story, I know, but you know me, I like to talk a lot. But that prompted Todd to invite me over to watch the State. Since neither one of us are going to games this year, we both have gone to games forever, State and Ole Miss respectively. So neither one of us are going to go because of COVID-19. So he invited me to come over and watch a game where there were several people there, all of which were Mississippi State fans, of course, including his 2 little grandsons dressed out, or his 2 little sons that are like my grandsons, that decked out in State jerseys. And I watched the game, and I actually pulled them to Mississippi State because, of course, I had to. I was involved with surrounded by about 10 people over there. Anyway, it was a hell of a game. For those of you, most of you, I'm sure, watched it. You don't need me to tell you much about it, but it was really 2 heavyweights trading blows, in my opinion. The lead changed 8 times in that ball game. 8 lead changes. And so 17-14 at the half, State was ahead. And former Stanislaus quarterback Miles Brennan made his starting debut. Played a couple of games, in the previous years, but he made his starting debut for LSU. Tough act to follow with Joe Burrow gone. LSU's lost 14 starters. They lost their offensive coordinator, the guy that went to, basically, Insminger's still there, but the guy that called the plays was, we know, is the kid that Joe, I can't remember his name.
Joe Brady.
Brady. Thank you. Brady, who's gone to Carolina. And so then they lost their defensive coordinator, went to be the head coach at Arianda, whatever his name is, went to be Anaconda or something like that, went to be the head coach at Baylor, and who was originally going to be Ole Miss's initial opponent this year, first game of the season. But anyway, and you got 2 or 3 other players that opted out because of COVID, and a starting defensive back wasn't COVID related, but he was in the hospital and missed the game. And
he's supposed to be the best player.
In addition to all those people gone, so was Ogeron's wife. She left him about 3 weeks after the national championship.
Is she really?
Yeah. So
wow.
I don't know I'm not getting into anything about that, not criticizing her, but anyway, that's all the stuff that's changed for LSU this year. So I really didn't expect them to win. State covered. State was State was what was the line on that name? Let's see, hell, I had it written down here somewhere. I can't remember. Anyway, State covered, of course, because they were the underdog. I think by 30. I think it was a 30-point spread. And but anyway, it was a hell of a ball game, and congratulations to all you Bullfrogs. And it was State's new quarterback was a transfer from Stanford. This kid at Stanford had been out on the West Coast, which is where Leach came from at Washington State, and they knew each other through that relationship. But he transferred one of these graduate transfers without having to sit out, and he did a hell of a job of throwing the Pirates' offense. I say the Pirate got the Kunas in this game, but the air raid attack was all over Tiger Stadium, and when State went in front for the last time with about 3.5 minutes left in the game, and then went on from there. But the stats were something like this: KJ Costello, something like that's the guy's name. It was 36 out of 60 for 623 yards. Hell, I couldn't throw for 600 yards if I played 3 years. And having been the best second string quarterback the Sigma U's ever had, second string quarterback, I might add. Anyway, he threw 5 TDs, 623 yards, 2 interceptions. He got sacked 5 times, but he's the one interviewed after the game, said it really means something to be in the SEC. It is different from the Pac-10, and he's right. Brennan was 27 out of 46, respectable, 345 yards, 3 TDs, 2 interceptions, and 3 sacks. Excuse me, 7 sacks. But the thing that really was the deal. State had 10 receptions, 10 receivers. 10 receivers caught passes. 10 different people caught passes, and led by a guy named, am I saying this right? Osiris Mitchell. Osiris Mitchell.
Yep.
Had 7 catches for 183 yards, and Kalen Hill, who's your outstanding running back at Mississippi State, gained a zillion yards last year rushing the ball. Got only 34 yards rushing, but he got 158 yards catching the ball because they throw a little swing pass or run a swing deal that it's almost like a rush. But he played his usual fantastic game. And it's just going to be that way, I think.
Yeah,
this year.
LSU just couldn't tackle though.
And well, they didn't tackle well, but they lost all their damn players.
Yeah.
But they're mainly their defensive coordinator.
Right.
But and the kicker. Now you correct me if let's say it was. I heard this from one of those kids over there. The kicker at the Mississippi State is some transfer from Arizona State named Ruiz, and he's something like 30 years old.
Yeah, I heard that.
30 or 31.
He's a grad transfer from Arizona State.
Well, what he's saying,
old,
the third grade for like 8 years. Or something.
He's old too.
He's old.
Well, he's old, and then LSU's punter. Was it LSU's punter? He was like 30, 31.
Well, maybe that's where maybe it was the punter that was 30. Okay,
it's-
well, I thought it was.
No, I'm not wrong. Am I right? LSU's punter?
Maybe,
Or
yeah.
Miami's punter. Miami's punter might be old. One of the guys is like 30 years old.
Well, 30's not old to me.
Well, I know, but I mean, for a college football player,
It
that's
is for a
old.
college football
Yeah.
player. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was a hell of a game. The line was 14.5. Not that we're on where I got 34. The over and under was 57, and that was definitely the over took care of that. 14.5 was the spread, and State obviously covered. But you want to comment on anything as a State fan?
I won $50 on the game.
It can't be all
the
that.
over for State's scoring was 20. I was like, I would assume we're going to score 20. First quarter I was a little nervous, but yeah, I don't know. It was amazing. I mean, our receivers were catching the ball.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a good quarterback. A couple mistakes, but he threw 60 times, so you're going to have a couple mistakes.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was pretty amazing. We'll see how we'll try to keep it up. But
I
Mike
was-
Leach is hilarious.
Yeah, he is. I
After
mean,
the game-
I'm a fan of his.
Yeah,
What did
after
he
the
say?
game-
I didn't see him after the
He
game.
said,
What did
I think he
say?
said something along the lines of the only reason we played this team is because New England.
Oh, I did see that.
New England and Green Bay and like Kansas City weren't available.
Already,
So, yeah.
already played
Yeah.
somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, so
In other words,
he's
LSU is
hilarious.
really good.
Yeah.
I understand that.
He's
That was
hilarious.
cute. I did hear that.
He's a good guy.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to all you State fans, including you, Taylor. That's they were, I think, fantastic. It really was a great game. Now, dipping to the other side of the in-state schedule, I told Taylor earlier that we had the same results. We could have had the same results at half the cost if we'd have just kept Matt Luke. It was 51-35 Florida. Ole Miss gave up a zillion points and scored a lot. So it's just the way we do. The scoring line on the Florida Ole Miss game was like this. Florida scored, and this is the quarter scores. Florida scored 14, 14, 13, and 10. So Ole Miss got progressively better on defense. That adds up to 51 points. Those were the first, second, third, and fourth quarter scores. Conversely, Ole Miss scored 7, 7, 7, and 14. So our offense was getting better. If we'd have played till next week, it might have been 400 to 398. We might have finally won the damn game. Who knows? But this was a case of Kyle squared, I call it, in this game. We had Kyle Trask at quarterback for Florida, and had a guy named Kyle Pitts at wide receiver who caught 8 passes for 170 yards and 4 touchdowns. Counted 4. It reminded me of this guy Wells that played against the Saints last week for Las Vegas, who, by the way, has got a pretty good ball club. The Raiders are pretty tight. I wouldn't.
They win today?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. But this guy Wells just tore the Saints up humongously. He was. I mean, you remember, for those of you that didn't see the game, he was on the practice squad for I don't remember what team, Atlanta or somebody. Anyway, he was on the practice squad in Gruden, and the Raiders were playing that team that week. And they saw him out before the game just screwing around, catching the ball, and he's like 6'8" and 286 pounds or something, and lightning fast, and he must play basketball because he looks like Bill Russell. Anyway, they were flying back on the team plane. Gruden and the personnel director said, "Who is that guy?" And they had him signed before they landed back in Oakland, and so that's how they got him last year. Just saw him warming up before the game. You know, you got those 7 guys on the on the squad that get put on, can't play that week, and so they're out there just throwing around, and that's how they found him. But he was tremendous. So this guy, back to the Ole Miss Florida game, this guy Kyle Pitts reminded me. I think he might have been this guy's little brother. Or something. I don't think Oakland was playing that day, or Las Vegas wasn't playing that day, so maybe he was playing for Florida, and then he was going to go play for the Raiders this weekend. But he was fantastic, and he just killed Ole Miss. He, like I say, caught 8 passes for 107 yards and 4 touchdowns. Trask was 30 out of 42, 71%, 416 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Count them, 6 touchdowns. Ole Miss started like you know, pretty fair. It was really, they started out like the Saints. We have these two quarters, put Corral and John Rice Plumlee in together, a la Saints and Drew Brees and the Swiss Army knife. But the only thing about that is that John, with all due respects, John Reese Plumlee was no Tyson Hill, and Ole Miss went for it on 4th and 3 inside Florida's 20-yard line in the first drive. Failed on their first possession, and that pretty much was the highlight. It sounds like the cry of any loser, but it was extremely poor tackling on Ole Miss's part, and costly penalties. But we were beaten by a much better team, and we do have one semi-emerging star. This kid, I'd never had heard of him. Dontario Drummond is a wide receiver from Laurel. He's a senior, 3-year letterman, but he hadn't played much special teams and stuff. Caught 2 passes. That's no big deal for 60 yards, but they were both for touchdowns. And the best thing he did was a play, if you happen to see it. He was playing wide receiver out in the left flat, and they threw a backwards pass to him, so it meant it was going to be set up to be a pass. He was rushed and had to, you know, most people like that would panic and screw up. He pump faked the guy who was trying to block his pass, evaded him, and threw a damn 45-yard touchdown.
I didn't see that. I didn't watch that.
So I thought that, I mean, he might be a third quarterback if we need one, but that was a tremendous play. We got to find the highlights where you can when you get beat 51-35. At the half, it was 28-14. Right before the end of the second half, Florida scored on the first, and it was so we were ahead. They were ahead 21-14, scored right at the end of the half, made it 28-14, got the ball and scored on their first possession on a 71-yard pass to that aforementioned Pitts, and it was the Pitts after that. Ole Miss had blitzed, and it was curtains on that play. Ole Miss scored 2 plays later, though, and it was, it wasn't the route, but the route was on, and we got beat by a much better team. I know Dan Mullen and all the state people enjoyed that like him. All right, I'm going to move on along and try to get through going here. Auburn beat Kentucky 29-13. It was Auburn's up like this. The thing about this game that I want to bring up, I don't know if you saw it, but Auburn's ahead 8-7. Kentucky scored first. Auburn scored and went for 2 right off the bat in the first quarter. I thought, what is Gus doing? He just wanted to. I guess he wanted to prove that they had a 2-point play to work on, but they got up 8-7. Kentucky later on has it near the end of right at the end of the half. Kentucky's got it 1st and goal on the 3-yard line. 1st and goal on the 3. They can't get it in. Kind of like me sometimes. On 4th and 1, Kentucky throws a pass, and Auburn intercepts it a yard inside the damn goal line and returns it 100 yards for an apparent touchdown. However, there was a question about whether he was bumped out of bounds when a teammate was trying to block for him. It turned out he didn't step out of bounds. The teammate was Gulfport's own Derek Hall, sophomore defensive end, who was hustling, and it wasn't really a dirty play, but he got called for a headbutt shot thing and an ejection right on that play on the sideline. So, it was the guy caused him to go out of bounds. It did so the play is nullified or the interception stands. No touchdown though. 100-yard damn touchdown return right at the end of the half. Hall is kicked out of the game, of course, automatic ejection, but they did let it go as an ejection in the first half. So even though the clock had run out, so he can come back and play next week. He just couldn't play in the second half. And I'm not knocking. I mean, the kid's a nice kid. It wasn't a bad play. It was a weird thing to see somebody return the ball 100 yards from on an interception. But there's one coming up that's weirder than that. Stand by. Auburn wins a tough one. Auburn's ahead 15-13 at the end of the third quarter, and they then scored 14 points in the fourth quarter. The line was 6.5. Auburn covered. Okay, A&M beats Vanderbilt 17-12, and that was a tough game last night. It was close all night long. Vandy covered. That was the big spread game that was covered. 31.5 was the line there, and A&M obviously didn't cover. Vandy started a natural freshman at quarterback, a kid named Ken Seals. He was no big results, 20 out of 29 for 150 yards, but really played a heads-up, solid ball game all night long. And I must say,
A&M's just not that good.
No, I mean, they just were kind of. I think they weren't up for Vanderbilt. They just didn't look that sharp. Yeah. But here's the unusual play I referred to earlier. It was 7-5 in the top of the seventh inning. It was 7-5 at the half, and here's A&M returns a punt out of their own end zone. Who does that? Okay. However, more strange than that was the fact that a blocker got down there and actually did a blindside block, called in the end zone to spring the Auburn punt returner. Ref throws the flag. A blindside block in the end zone is a safety. I never seen it in my life. I've been watching football for 70 years.
Wow.
It was a blindside block, and it's a penalty from another Aggie. So Vanderbilt gets 2 points and the ball, and that was, I've just never seen it. It was just an unusual. It was a tough, hard game all night long, and so it was just unusual. Okay, our hearts are out, and we're condolences for Tulane and Southern. Poor thing. I mean, Southern's had a tough thing. The coach's father died, and his mother's been sick. I think she might even have been in a car wreck with him. I was trying to find all that out from somebody, and I couldn't get it. I think that's what one of my Southern friends told me, that he just wasn't with it. Yeah. Hobson just wasn't with it, and so he's been in kind of a funk because of that, and that's understandable.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but I feel sorry for Scotty Wallen, the new young coach. He said he's embarrassed again. Tulane beats Southern 66-24. I can remember when LSU beat Tulane 61-0 and 61-7. Everybody's feeling sorry for him, but the game. Here's Tulane's box score in that thing, and I like to do these little scoring things by quarter to show you the points. Here's Tulane 7-24. This is not the score at the end of the quarter. That's how many points are scored in that second quarter. 7 in the first quarter, 24 second quarter, 21 third quarter, 14 third quarter, for a total of 66. It was like a pinball machine. Jeez. Southern scores 14. They're ahead in the first quarter, 14-7. So they score 14, 7, 3, 0, total of 24. Tulane had 430 yards rushing, 7 TDs, 142 yards passing, 572 yards total offense. But just a shame for Southern. My hearts go out to the Golden Eagles. Okay, finishing up rapidly. Texas beats Texas Tech 63-56. The air raid. Leach might have left Texas Tech a few years ago, but it ain't gone. The air raid's not gone. Texas and Texas Tech 63-56 in overtime. They scored. Each team scored a touchdown in the overtime, and then. Texas ended up winning 63-56. I think they played. Well, no, I'm getting this confused with somebody else. I beg your pardon. There was another overtime thing with somebody.
Texas won it.
Texas won in overtime, 63-56. It was a nip and tuck all the way. Georgia beat Arkansas 37-10. Not much there. Alabama, I didn't even watch that game. 38-19 over Missouri. Tennessee, I watched the Tennessee-South Carolina game. It was close all night long. And somehow they just kind of eked it out. Tennessee won 31-27. Another interesting game, Kansas State beat Oklahoma 38-35. K-State 38, Oklahoma 35. Kansas State scored 17 points in the fourth quarter against Oklahoma. Oklahoma was ahead 28-7 with 5 minutes left in the third quarter. 28-7 with 5 minutes left in the third quarter. Kansas State scored 24 straight points, including 17 in the fourth quarter, to take that game.
They don't still have that old coach, do they? Kansas State.
Yeah,
he retired.
He retired, I think. I'm not sure who took his job. Snyder.
Yeah, Bill Snyder.
Yeah. Is it Bill Snyder? Same as our sportscaster, maybe. Maybe it might be.
I don't know.
We'll look that up.
We'll check that out.
More to come next week. Anyway, there were 20 games postponed this weekend in college on the West Coast later on, and I guess it was COVID. It didn't say why. It just said postponed.
I just saw. I know Notre Dame and Wake Forest was postponed because of COVID, but I didn't see anything else.
Yeah,
and then Virginia Tech had 20 players not playing because of COVID.
So that's what. Anyway, so some 20 games were postponed. That's 40 teams were postponed. And I know I said earlier this summer, I don't know how we're going to get through the year. As I said, the Saints play Green Bay tonight in the Dome. It's tough when they don't have a crowd in there. The injuries are troubling for the Saints, and other than Alvin Kamara, they ain't got much on offense with Michael out. Drew is maybe, I hope not, but he may spike. He's just not looking good. I do want to congratulate an earlier game, the first opening season, first pro game, first week, Dax, again, Mississippi State. Dax did a heroic job. For those of you that didn't see the Dallas game against Atlanta, go look it up somewhere, because, Atlanta had just ended up beating the hell out of Dallas, and Dallas was behind, I don't remember the exact number, but they were behind about 30 points. It was an ass whipping. But Dax kept his head. They kept plugging. Atlanta is now having Atlanta blew that big Super Bowl lead 2 years ago.
They lost again today.
They lost again today with a big lead. They dropped about a 20 point
Yeah.
lead today and lost coming from behind. So obviously they must be staffed by a bunch of Ole Miss defensive players. That's all I can say. But Dallas, I mean, it did a hell of a job, and Dax played a very good game to lead Dallas against them the other day. So if you haven't seen that, go look it up and watch it. Okay, we'll see how this works out. It may be a little bit too long for anybody to watch this long, but so long until next time. See you.